What is up, guys, and welcome back to the Sweat It Out podcast.
If you want to be successful, look inside.
We don't like sitting in the discomfort.
Then all of a sudden that day came when I got $20 and 2 free drinks to do a show, and I was like, oh shit, here we go, baby. You know?
Thank God she hasn't caught a chicken yet, because she'll tear her head off.
Don't be soft.
That patience is key.
If all my friends are winning, then it's going to make me want to win more.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Sweat It Out podcast. Today we have a very, very special guest. Been looking forward to this one for quite some time now. Known this guy for, a few years, trained his wife, gotten real close with the family, love them, love everything that he's about. We got Mark Sisson in the house today.
What's up? How's it going?
What's
Such
going
a pleasure
on, Mark?
to have you here.
Thanks.
So you've been pretty busy the past couple of years, I'd say, huh?
Yeah. I mean, the past couple decades. My whole life, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what you want to cover here, but because I can go way back. But most recently, the last couple of years was kind of revolving around Primal Kitchen, my food company, and growing that and nurturing it, and then selling it to Kraft Heinz 2 years ago. So that was sort of the big push for the last 5 years of my most recent career.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of everything Primal Kitchen has. Obviously, thank you for everything you guys have given me. But I'm a huge advocate. I tell everybody to go out and buy the Primal Kitchen stuff. It's honestly, I'm surprised that it's so healthy and you found a way to make it taste so good. Because that's usually the biggest problem, right?
Huge. I mean, that's the essential question for any company that's trying to make better for you foods. Historically, and this is why I started the company. Historically, you would find stuff that was, good for you. You'd look at the label and it's like, oh yeah, this has some pretty good ingredients in it, and no bad ingredients, or not many bad ingredients. But typically the taste was what was compromised. On the other hand, there were a lot of foods that people are used to, especially the things that we make, the sauces, the dressings, the toppings, the barbecue sauces, all of these things that you put on food to theoretically make it taste better. And they do make it taste better, but then you're warned immediately, don't use too much of it because it's not good for you. They contain unhealthy fats and oils, or they contain too much sugar or artificial ingredients. So the challenge was to come up with something that first and foremost tasted great, but also had the kind of ingredients that my followers, but most particularly myself, would be willing to not just put a little bit on the food, but put a lot on the food.
Oh, I mean, you can add me to that group. So what made you really want to make that jump to start Primal Kitchen? How did that get going?
Well, I'd been I had a supplement company I started about 30 years ago, and my supplement business was doing quite well, and it was the reason that I started Mark's Daily Apple. I started a blog to espouse my ideas about health and fitness and diet and exercise and nutrition and medicine, and all this information became a platform where I could be my own advertiser and be a sort of I didn't need other outside advertisers. They call it self-liquidating in the business, but so that's how Mark's Daily Apple started, and I was selling my supplements, which I was very proud of. But over the years, I was writing more and more about food, more and more about how diet is really the essential ingredient in achieving excellent health and ideal body composition and good energy and muscle mass and avoiding injury and illness and all the other things that we talk about. So the more I wrote about food, the more the list of things that you could possibly eat to enhance your health shrunk, and you get rid of the sugars, and you get rid of the pies, the cakes, the candies, the cookies, the sweetened beverages. Okay, most people know that. Then you get rid of the industrial seed oil. So you get rid of the corn oil, canola oil, soybean oil, those adulterated, highly processed omega-6 fats that are probably more problematic than sugars. And then you get rid of refined carbohydrates, like in particularly grains. You come down to a fairly short list of food: meat, fish, fowl, eggs, nuts, seeds, vegetables, a little bit of fruit. So really, the idea behind eating a healthy diet and making it sustainable and fun and exciting is what you put on the food, how you prepare it, the sauces, the dressings, the toppings, the herbs, the spices, the methods of preparation. And that was really what I saw was missing from at least most of the stores that I shopped in. You couldn't find a salad dressing that didn't have some mixture of corn oil, canola oil, soybean oil. You couldn't find a ketchup that didn't have a lot of high fructose corn syrup. Same with barbecue sauces. Mayonnaise, which was a staple for a lot of people. You couldn't find one that didn't have not just artificial ingredients, but again, canola oil or soybean oil. So my idea was to create these healthy versions of what everybody wanted to eat, but really healthy people were sort of avoiding eating because they couldn't find these things in the stores. And among many other challenges was the idea that to make something like this, to use really good ingredients, these ingredients don't cost 10% more or 50% more. They cost 10 times as much sometimes. So it really costs a lot to make good food. I mean, I guess the converse of that is it's really inexpensive to make crappy food, to make crunchy, salty, fatty, sweet food that you pick up on the shelf and you go, "Whoa, this tastes great. It's not good for me."
Yep.
So I think the real barrier that we broke into was discovering people's willingness to pay more for a demonstrably better product that tasted good and that also, again, served their desire to have healthful ingredients in them. And we didn't know whether it would be some tiny subset of people who had a crap load of money and didn't care, or whether it was going to be average mothers who were willing to pay a little bit more for ketchup or a little bit more for mayonnaise, knowing that their kids were going to be eating this. And it's really opened up a huge marketplace for not just us, but for a lot of other companies that have now started making similar products. And I'm happy about that. I mean, to the extent that we can take these healthy products and crowd the crappy products off the shelf, I'm all for competition.
Oh, and that's amazing, Mark. I got to say that when I first came across your product was at Whole Foods, and it tastes amazing. I want to go back to when you were young, when you were a kid. Was this something that you learned from your family, or was this something you learned along the way growing up, becoming healthier, eating healthier, health and fitness? Was that always embedded in you?
Well, interesting question, because I grew up in a small fishing village in Maine. My father was a painter, an artist, and he actually supported the family with selling his art, which is rare even today. I was not going to be a fisherman. I was interested in doing what I could to leave that little town and go someplace else. My mother was interested in, I think, early on in longevity and health. She's the one who really got me started, and she was reading Adele Davis and similar authors who were writing about their notion of the science of diet and nutrition. A lot of what we were reading in those days turned out to be probably wrong, but it was, that's how science works. That's how the world works. So I started reading books on health and fitness and longevity when I was in my early teens. It was a bit of a kind of a nerdy, geeky kind of thing, but I started getting interested in longevity from a very early age. So I was always cooking my own meals, and I would make a meal of sautéed chicken livers at 13 years old. Or eating salads. I wouldn't say that I had orthorexia, which is sort of a real focus on the precision of your meals. But I was certainly interested in trying to do the right thing. I read some books on training at the time, and Ken Cooper came out with a book called Aerobics, which sort of transformed the landscape as it applied to exercise. His discovery was that the more aerobic exercise you did, the better it was for your heart. The term cardiovascular exercise was coined around that time. And there was an association that the stronger your heart was, the longer you would live. So And at that time, a lot of people were dying of heart, not a lot, but a higher proportion of people were dying of heart disease in the 60s, for instance, than die even now.
And you think that's just because of the shift in food products?
Oh, we can really go into that one. That's because that's a huge and interesting dissection of an epidemiology project. But basically, his thesis was that if you had a strong heart, that it would overcome a lot of the issues that people experience when they had heart disease. And it was probably responsible for some of the decline. In other words, that begat the running boom of the 70s. That and Frank Shorter winning the marathon in the Olympics in 1972, and then Bill Rogers winning the Boston Marathon. There was a period of time there when Cooper's book came out. People started this jogging craze. Jim Fixx wrote a book on running. And then we had some world champion marathoners, and so the golden age of marathoning in the U.S. happened in those years. So you could argue that some of that attention to aerobic exercise probably had a good effect on the health of the public. But I would also argue that in the 1960s, 42% of the population smoked cigarettes.
Crazy.
So. And a large percentage of those smoked an average of 2 packs a day. So if you take the population of the U.S. today, which is 330 million some odd, and compare it to the population of the 1960s, which was probably half the population then, but there were 32 million more smokers in the 60s.
That's insane.
So that's 32 million more people than today who probably got heart disease or heart attacks or died from that. Certainly got lung cancer. Not all of them, but it was predisposed.
Good amount. Yeah.
Predisposed to lung cancer. So I think, when you look at some of the longitudinal studies looking at all the factors involved in heart disease and cancer and disease risk, that's a really compelling asterisk you have to put in there, is the number of people who actually smoked a lot in the 1960s. Anyway, I digress. So I started running and I was trying to eat right, and I had read books that said that carbohydrates were the main fuel for running. So I plowed down a lot of carbs of all types, and in order to fuel all the miles that I was doing, and eventually I became a pretty fit young guy, and
you're a highly competitive runner.
I was competitive. Yeah, I went to I was
just a little bit.
I joined the track team in high school. As this nerdy geeky kid who was doing long distance running when no one else in my town was doing it. It's like, what are you running for? What is that? That just doesn't make any sense. So, and I would run to and from school, which was my main means of transportation, and I got relatively fit just from that little amount of exercise, and went out for the track team as a freshman in high school and wound up being the high point man on the team. I'd win the mile, the 2 mile, and oddly sometimes the pole vault, because I had some experience as a gymnast early on. So, and then I went to college and excelled in track and field and cross country in college, and then I just sort of shifted my distances upward to 10Ks and marathons after that, and ultimately finished 5th in the U.S. National Championships in 1980 in the marathon. And just on a lark, a few years later, finished 4th at Ironman in Hawaii. So that was sort of the epitome of my endurance career, but also was enough to put a red flag in my face and say, look, this is a lot of pain and suffering for no money, and I was at the time also experiencing a lot of maladies, a lot of illnesses and injuries that I should not have had, which I later found out were quite largely just a result of the diet that I'd chosen, a highly inflammatory diet that I thought was the right choice. But in those days, everyone wants to do the right thing, I think, but if the information is wrong, and you still take on that. That advice, it can be detrimental.
And then I think then you have, after that, you had the era during the 80s, right, where it was just like a huge fast food era, right? Where fast food was like at all-time high during that time.
Oh, yeah. No, it's and it, you know, it continues to today, but fast food was, I mean, you're right. It was a big deal in my town when they built a McDonald's 32 miles away. 32 miles away. People would drive to McDonald's to get a burger because of the cachet or whatever, rather than just go to the local hamburger spot and get probably a healthier version of what they wanted. Yeah.
So you were, putting on all these miles on your legs and really feeling not so great in your joints and in your performance, and that led you to the Primal Blueprint method?
Yeah. So, I mean, in college, I was pre-med. I didn't go to medical school, but I had a pre-med course, and I mean, that was my track in college. And I was focused on evolutionary biology primarily. And then sort of years later, when modern genetic science sort of kind of came to the forefront, it became clear to me that a lot of what was going on with me, and I had arthritis, severe tendonitis, IBS.
At such an early age.
Well, now we're talking about in my 20s, but still, but I mean, I literally retired from competition when I was 28, and by then I was over it. I was kind of a wreck.
Wow.
So that's when I had arthritis in my mid to late 20s. Had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, pretty horribly. I got sick a lot. I got cold and flu multiple times every year. I think, I know from a trashed immune system. So much of what was going on with me didn't make sense because I was trying to do the right thing. I was like, I'm running, I'm putting in the miles, I'm racking up the points, the aerobic points, and I'm eating the high carb diet. I'm avoiding fats. I'm doing all the things that they said I needed to do to be healthy. And while I was racing well, I looked fit on the outside. I was kind of falling apart on the inside. So that's when I had to retire because of the injuries ultimately. And I just said, look, this is not right. I want to figure out a way for myself to become strong and lean and fit and happy and healthy and productive without the suffering and the sacrifice and without all the pain and all the crap that goes with it. So I really just kind of dedicated the rest of my life to figuring out ways in which I could achieve these goals. And then in so doing, I uncovered ways in which I thought a lot of other people could benefit from that. And that really, my goal was to kind of uncover what I call these hidden genetic switches that we all have that are based on the inputs that we select, the behavioral inputs. So genes, they constitute a recipe that not only makes us at birth and has us grow, but genes are working all the time. They're building proteins and they're shifting our bodies around, and they're repairing and renewing and regenerating us and recreating us minute by minute. And the genes are basically a set of blueprints that need something to act on them to turn those switches on or off to make those proteins. And that's what we call the epigenome. That's the level of control above the genes that causes the genes to turn on or off. And that's the behavior. So those are the foods. Those are the choices of foods, the choices of exercise. Do you lift weights? Do you run long distance? Do you do high-intensity intervals? Do you do long, slow stuff? It's the amount of sleep you get. Do you sleep 8 hours a day or a night or 9 hours? Do you burn the candle at both ends? It's the amount of play that you engage in. Does your brain become more plastic as a result of you choosing to play in a certain way? Or if you play too much, is it bad for you? So my goal was to kind of figure out all these different genetic switches that we have and to create a template, which I called the Primal Blueprint, based on the primary nature of humanity and based on I like the word primal. What can I say?
One of my favorite books, by the way.
Yeah,
anyone listening, if you guys haven't gotten it, make sure you guys go get that. It's a phenomenal book, and it'll open my eyes to it.
Yeah,
an entire new way of and I told you this before. You know, entire new way of thinking about nutrition.
Well, and I wrote it 13 years ago, and I've written 10 books since, and I still think it's the sort of a must read for anyone who wants to understand what I do and where I come from, and the basis for all the other books that I've written. It goes back to how it's described in the Primal Blueprint.
Where's the blueprint?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I kind of like you. I come from a sports background where, you know, I was working with athletes and we were giving them protein shakes and putting dextrose and all, you know, the sugar compounds in there, and because you thought that was really what was going to fuel them.
My first foray into supplements, I ran a friend of mine's supplement company for about 5 years, and I created a lot of products here. And one of the products was called Carbo Concentrate, and it was literally a big can of maltodextrin. And I used to brag that I could put 800 calories into a bike water bottle. Of pure maltodextrin, which is basically pure sugar.
Sugar, yeah.
But the assumption in those days was that, you know, that was what caused you to hit the wall, was running out of sugar. And if you could find a method to introduce a slow drip of glucose into the body, you could stave off the wall. We know completely differently now that it's really about, the wall is about learning how to burn fats more efficiently and using ketones in your brain, because ultimately it's not your muscles' lack of glycogen that causes you to hit the wall in any sort of endurance contest. It's the brain's lack of glucose and the brain shutting you down in advance of you really encountering any sort of muscular damage. So if you can bypass that, you always have some amount of glycogen reserve in the muscles, and the brain loves ketones. So if you can train your brain to use ketones efficiently, and you train your muscles to burn fats efficiently, then even if you do run out of glucose, a little bit of glucose taken in an exogenous drink during a long race is still a lot better than slamming 800 calories worth of glucose into a bike bottle and then throwing up halfway into the run because your stomach can't digest it.
See, what I find fascinating is, and I start thinking about is like, we have all this great information in today's age, right? It's going back even a few years before. Information that's updated, information that's proven that's worked, like yourself. But yet, schools and other places don't drive the education of true health and business. Why is it that you feel like that's never something that they want to drive forward when it comes to these kind of things?
So what do you mean they don't drive true health and business?
They don't really drive the awareness of it. Right.
Well, I mean, schools in general, have curriculum that was designed by certain people a while back, and it takes a massive sea change to shift away from what we'd been taught, and that's the issue that we have with medicine right now, and medical schools that are teaching the same stuff they taught 20, 30, 40 years ago. For instance, particularly with regard to, say, cardiovascular disease. I mean, I encounter, doctors all the time who still cling to the theory that saturated fat and cholesterol are the proximate cause of heart disease, and you have to cut back on those, and you have to
don't eat red meat.
Don't eat red. Yeah, no, exactly.
Stay away from eggs. Stay away from red meat.
All that stuff, and so the schools, for instance, push that curriculum, which I don't agree with. And they might even push the business, like medical school might push the business of medicine, saying part of the business of medicine is doing a blood panel and discovering that your patient has a total cholesterol of 205, and therefore you should start prescribing statin drugs. That's the business of medicine. So there is that ongoing kind of combination of quote health and quote business that are sort of driving the downhill, slippery slope that we're on in terms of health of this country right now, where we spend over $3 trillion a year on fixing shit that doesn't need to be fixed.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So what makes a more paleo-driven diet more efficient for someone who wants to increase their performance as compared to maybe a carb-heavy diet?
Well, a couple of things. If you're an athlete, if you're into performance and you want to perform better, getting rid of the toxins in your diet would be like the number one first thing I'd try to do. So if you cut out the crap, the overly sweetened beverages, the pies, the cakes, the candies, the cookies, and all that stuff, if you cut out the artificial ingredients, If you cut out the industrial seed oils, which may be interfering with the throughput of nutrients in and out of cells, a lot of people would now suggest that insulin resistance is what it is in so many people, not just because of their mismanagement of sugar in their diet, but because of these oils that have been incorporated into cell membranes and then make those cells comprise the membrane and then make it dysfunctional. So there's that aspect of just cleaning up your diet, and that's what I would tell anybody, even if you're not going to go paleo, or you're not going to be carnivore or even keto, you just want to clean your diet up and be, a responsible vegetarian or lacto-ovo vegetarian. I would certainly. The first thing that happens in any of these new ways of eating is that when you get rid of the poison or the toxin, you feel better. So people will say, well, I thought about going keto or I thought about going carnivore, but my friend convinced me to go vegetarian and I like it and I'm feeling good. I'm like, great. I love the fact that you're feeling better. It's probably because you've cut out a lot of the crap that you were eating before. Mm-hmm. That's part one. But part two, and more to your point, it behooves any performance athlete to be better at burning fat for a lot of reasons. Number one, fat is there to be burned. It's not to be kept forever. It's to be stored for the short term and then tapped into as a fuel source shortly thereafter. The problem is people put on, they gain fat and they never burn it off, and they gain a pound or two a year, every year. You say a pound or two a year doesn't sound like that much, but
but over 10 years, it's 20 pounds.
Well, in 25 years, this is the classic. You're 4 years out of college, you're 25 years old, you're going to put on a pound or two a year for the next 20 years. So when you're 45, you're 30 or 40 pounds overweight, and it's it's insidious. It doesn't, it creeps up on you. You don't notice it until one day you're like, holy crap! I mean, how did I get here? So if the idea that that fat is it's part of who we are. We are designed to store fat. Let's make no mistake. We're designed from an evolutionary perspective. We are wired to overeat because for most of human history, food was scarce. There was not a lot of it around. When you came across a supply of food, you ate more than you needed. The body had this amazing method of converting extra energy into fat that it stored conveniently on the hips and the thighs and the butt, like conveniently over the center of gravity. We're bipedal. If we had fat stored in our shoulders, we'd tip over like a shitty Segway. But so we have this ability and we have this propensity to overeat. It gets in the way of a lot of people, and we convert very conveniently and very efficiently. We convert the excess calories into stored energy that we call body fat. But
I'm waiting for Josh to look over at me because I know.
I've never seen someone take down. I mean, I think he could close down a buffet, Mark. It's impressive.
So we have to talk about what that looks like and how that manifests in so many people and why. But the converse of that is to be able to train the body to take fat out of storage and combust it as fuel and use it for what it was intended to be used, which is to get you around through time and space. So back to why it would behoove anybody interested in performance to start with a Primal Blueprint diet. And the Primal Blueprint diet basically looks at eliminating all the things I talked about, but it doesn't yet eliminate starchy carbs. So potatoes, sweet potatoes, root tubers, turnips and carrots, and all those are in there. And it doesn't eliminate, for instance, legumes like beans, black beans, pinto beans, things like that. It just basically says at the beginning of your journey into a new way of eating, just get rid of the stuff you should not be eating. Only eat real food. Mm-hmm. I mean, imagine that. Only eat real food. With that elimination of the bread and the rice and the pasta and the cereals and all of the other stuff that you can sort of look to in the standard American diet, and you go, wow, people have like pancakes or waffles for breakfast, or they have toast, or they have a sandwich at lunch with some chips and fries, or they have a bagel for a mid-morning snack, or they have pasta for dinner, these are all forms of carbohydrate that are processed and they're not real food, and yet we've sort of become accustomed to having them as part of our diet. In fact, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, even through today, has suggested 6 to 11 servings of grains.
It's the
every
base
day.
of the food pyramid, right?
The base of the food pyramid. It's ridiculous. So if you get rid of that base of the food pyramid and you just eat healthy fats and proteins and vegetables, some fruit, you can still find yourself taking in 100, 110, 120, 130 grams of carbs a day, but that's a lot less than the 400 or 500 grams of carbs that most people eat on a standard American diet. And with that reduction in carbs, the brain starts to go, hey, we're going to not get the amount of glucose we used to get. Let's start getting really efficient at burning fat in the muscles. Let's get more efficient at utilizing ketones in the brain. And so for the first, I'm going to say 6 or 8 years of my primal journey, that's all I did. And I got great. And I've never been fat, so it was never an issue for me. But I felt comfortable going through a day with 3 meals a day and lots of energy and maintaining muscle mass and not getting sick and not being hungry. And then I thought, at some point, well, is there a next level of this? Is there another level that more mimics the human experience, which was not to eat 3 meals a day, but to eat maybe 1 or 2 meals a day and still thrive? In fact, maybe thrive even more than you would on 3 meals a day. So I experimented with keto about 5 or 6 years ago and discovered that by eliminating the rest of the carbs, the potatoes, the rice, the beans, any of the starchy stuff that I was consuming, by eliminating most of the fruits, I got down to like 50, 60 grams of carbs a day. I was keto-ish, and I wasn't necessarily in ketosis, but I was living a keto lifestyle, and I was thriving, and I was having, again, maintaining muscle mass, doing all the things I wanted to do, no feeling of sacrifice or having to will myself through, mental discipline to avoid eating. So that was really interesting to me. And I wrote a book called The Keto Reset Diet, which was a New York Times bestseller, and that was gratifying to see a lot of people embrace keto right around the time other authors were starting to talk about keto. And now it's a thing. After that, I thought, well, and I knew at the time that athletes would benefit from reducing carbs even further, because to the extent that you can train your body to burn fat efficiently, you can get to the point, and we didn't even know this 10 years ago, you can get to the point where you can get 95 to 97% of all your energy needs in the muscles, doing 80 to 85% of your max capacity just from stored body fat. So guys like Zach Bitter, who's an ultramarathoner, can run under 7-minute miles for 100 miles and get most of his energy from either the stored body fat or the fats he's consuming. He's done these races without eating anything, which I find...
That's unbelievable.
It's believable if you understand the science and you go, okay, this is a guy who, yes, he looks skinny, but he's still carrying 20,000 calories of fat on his body. I'm 10% body fat. I figure I have 30,000 calories of extra energy stored on me. That's how the system was designed. It's so elegant. So at 20,000 calories, even Zach Bitter has enough at 100 calories per mile. He's got enough stored body fat to run 200 miles.
It's amazing. Without
consuming anything and without damaging his body, without tapping into his muscle tissue or any of the sort of emergency measures that the body might otherwise have. So this ability to train yourself to become really good at burning fat and then to rely on that ability, not just while you're competing, but day in and day out for all your energy needs, whether it's a fasted workout in the gym in the morning doing heavy legs, or whether it's a long run or a long ride or a walk on the beach or whatever it is, your body becomes really good at burning fat. And as important, your brain becomes really good at using ketones. And so ketones are this amazing magic fuel that we all have the capacity to make. It's the fourth fuel. You think about fats, protein, and carbohydrate. Well, ketone is a fuel that your brain uses. It actually prefers it over glucose. It's just that most people never get to that point where they're providing your body enough ketones. And you have to prompt the body to make ketones, and you do that by withholding the sources of glucose. You withhold the carbohydrate for a period of time. It's not a long period of time. It could be 2 weeks, could be 3 weeks. I mean, I have friends who've done it for 10 years and thrive. So these are guys who are they're keto, but they're not in ketosis. And this is a really interesting kind of little subset of this discussion, which is ketosis describes a condition where your body's producing excess ketones. Osis actually means like a pathologic condition or an excess of something. So people are in ketosis, their bodies are producing an excess of ketones, mostly because they haven't built the metabolic machinery to burn the ketones and to appreciate the ketones, and they haven't reached a point where the liver goes, hey, I know how to do this now. I'm the one who makes ketones. I make all the ketones for the body. You've trained yourself how to burn fat in the muscles, so we don't even need to send ketones to the muscles. The muscles actually become ketone resistant, and the ketones are all saved for the brain. Now, the brain uses about 500 calories a day. That's about 20 calories an hour.
Wow.
And it's not... when people talk about how much energy the brain uses, it uses a lot of, 20%, 25% of the body's energy requirements go to the brain. But when it's only 500 calories a day, it's only 20 calories an hour, and this doesn't vary much whether you're doing, 700-pound deadlifts or running, 40 miles, or you're in a tennis tournament, or you're in a chess match, or you're under a lot of stress. The brain's energy requirements don't vary much. Maybe 1.5 times normal, but not 10 times normal like you would encounter in the glutes and the thighs if you were doing a heavy leg day. So with that in mind, and if you've taught the brain how to excel on ketones, the liver just decides, because the body tends to want to conserve energy. The body doesn't want to waste energy. That's why you're more inclined to sit on the couch than go for a 10-mile run, right?
Oh, that's why? I just had
I'm not to get this guy.
Yeah. So the body, it does whatever it can to try and conserve energy, which is why you tend more to store fat than to burn it, because the body says, hey, I'd rather hang on to this in case there's an emergency sometime. So in this effort to keep the brain happy with ketones, the liver says, hey, I know exactly how much ketones to make right now. I don't want to overproduce it. I don't want to shoot the ketones into the bloodstream and have the person test 5 millimolar or 6 millimolar on their ketone meter, because a lot of people who enter into ketosis early on and think keto is a great way to go, they're like bragging about how high their numbers are on the ketone meter. But somebody who's been doing this for a long time, they become so adapted to it that they, while they might not eat more than 30, 40, 50 grams of carbs a day, they're rarely more than 0.5 millimolar or 0.6 millimolar, because the body has so adapted to it, and the liver has so adapted to making just enough ketones to make the brain happy that it's not wasting them and spilling them out in the urine or the breath or into the bloodstream.
Oh, that keto breath is the worst, man.
Yeah.
That's the worst.
So it's a very elegant system. So that's another reason that somebody who's interested in performance might think in terms of doing a primal or a keto or even a intermittent fasting type program. And then at the end of the day, if you're an athlete, probably unless you're a sumo wrestler, the kind of the main thing you want to achieve is what we call power to weight ratio. You want to be the littlest guy in your category with the most amount of power. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but
it's a good way to put it, though,
to
be honest.
Yeah. So even if you're a lineman playing football, I suspect rather than being 370 and a fat schlub, you'd rather be 320 and a powerful son of a bitch who can squat 1,000 pounds. And that's a power to weight kind of ratio, right? And it works across the board, and especially if you're in a category where you have to make weight. If you're a
fighter,
a fighter, or and we could talk about ballet dancers. They need to, so, I mean, this has been an issue for, say, female athletes over the years, gymnasts and ballerinas, dancers. They've always been sort of in this world of having to watch their weight because anorexia was a driving force, and it's an inappropriate strategy, I have to say.
I remember being a wrestler and the things I had to do to wrestle and meet weight.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
No, I mean, I had a friend in high school that wrestled at like 112, and he normally weighed 140. Whatever the category was, like one of the lowest categories.
I was literally weighing in football.
Yeah.
Not even joking. 220, 225. They would make me drop to 171 for wrestling.
Yeah.
And I would do it in like 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
It was insane.
No, it is insane because it's life threatening when you do it that way. And you're
out.
probably too young to remember the rubber suits and the spitting and all of the stuff that went along with that.
I remember the garbage.
sauna suits. I know the sauna suits.
The 4 sweatpants, the 4 sweaters, the garbage bags, and they'll give me a cup with a pack of gum, and they say you got to fill up this cup to the top until you come back.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much spinning really does burn calories. Though, right? I mean, so you mentioned you were eating 3 meals a day. What made you shift into more of like an intermittent fasting, 2 meals a day? I mean, obviously you have this book. I love this book, by the way. And on the low, I've been kind of following your diet for a while. Even before you wrote this book, I just kind of paid attention to what you're doing. I'm like, this guy is super fit. I want to look like that. How are you doing it? And really, I just paid attention. You just don't really eat breakfast.
Yeah. So I haven't eaten breakfast for a long time. And it was, one of those things where I thought, it works for me. Does it work for other people? Can I make it work for other people? And then as you look further and further into the science, and you start to realize that, we eat just too much food. I mean, as a nation, across the board, we probably eat more than we should. The question is, what should we eat, or how much? What's the amount of food that's appropriate? And what I realized for myself was I just wasn't hungry when I woke up. And I was never one, even when I was into the early days of Primal Blueprint, one of the things I said was, if you're not hungry, don't eat. And so it typically, for me, it was like I woke up, I had a cup of coffee, and I felt great, wasn't hungry. That's because I'm great at burning fat. I derive most of my energy from fat all day long, so I don't need to eat. So at the same time as I was starting to do research on this, there's a lot of new information coming down about intermittent fasting and what is intermittent fasting. Is it 3 days of not eating, or is it a day and a half of not eating at a minimum, or is it something as simple as compressed eating window, where you only eat during a 6 or 8 hour window during the day? And for most people, that they say from noon to 6, or from 1:30 to 7:30, which is my eating window. And that's so the question was really, is intermittent fasting, does it require long periods to get any kind of benefit, or can you benefit from short periods? And it turns out you can get benefit from a short period of not eating. It turns out that most of the good things happen to the human body when you're not eating. So all the repair takes place when you're not eating. All of the housekeeping in the cells, all of the fat burning, the disposal of excess body fat happens when you're not eating. When you're eating, all that stuff shuts off. When you're eating, and there's a cascade of insulin, and and there's all these other hormones we can talk about, glucagon and leptin and ghrelin and epinephrine. But basically, when you're eating, your body is sort of shut down all of its repair mode and is now going into, okay, gotta fill the coal bins here for some future time, and so all of the energy is directed toward digesting that food and disposing of that food. So your inflammation rises, your heart rate rises. Some of the processes that would be repairing stuff in the body stop, they cease, while your body is now trying to dispose of, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but to take the energy that you just took in and either put it in the cells or pass it through the digestive tract and excrete it. So if you can sort of visualize that people who eat 3 meals a day, or 3 meals plus 2 snacks, they're always in an inflamed, high heart rate state, and their bodies are never having an opportunity to sit back and go, all right, I'll take the next 15 hours, 18 hours, whatever, 48 hours in some cases, and repair. I'll consume the damaged proteins in some of my cells. I'll consume some of the damaged fats. I'll just actually consume some of the senescent cells, some of the dead or aging cells that were not functioning full capacity. We'll get rid of those. We'll repair some of the DNA, some of the links in the DNA that have been broken. There's a whole method by which the body upregulates that activity. But it requires that you not be engaged in eating, that you not be shooting all these different hormones into the body that are designed to sequester nutrients versus repairing and improving. And when I say I'm talking about not just repairing, from injury and damaged tissue, but just recovering from a workout. Like there are people, and I'm one of them, who feel strongly that the longer I can go without eating after a workout, the better it is for me. Now if I'm a bodybuilder and I'm trying to throw on 50 pounds of mass and I'm slugging down mass gainer shakes and I'm juiced up, that's a different thing. But as we get back to the notion of performance, my idea of performance is, and this goes back to a statement I made. I made this in college, and I was a skinny runner. I weighed 145 pounds, and I ran a lot. I ran in those days between 80 and 100 miles a week. Later on, for years, I ran 100 miles a week. But I always lifted while I was doing it, and because I was a runner, I never put on a lot of weight. But I was probably the strongest marathoner. There was probably no one faster than me in the country that was as strong as I was upper body. I just felt like that was part of my superpower. I didn't have the genetics to be a real world-class runner without the weights behind it as well. And somebody, some football player that I didn't like that much came up to me one day, and he was a big brute guy, and I was always in the gym same time as me. And he's like, dude, you're in here all the time, you're lifting weights, you're a fucking marathon runner, like what is your point? What are you trying to do? And I said, well, I'm trying to get as small as I can and still kick your ass.
I love that. That's great.
So that was, and he rolled his eyes, but he didn't slug me. So there's that. But that was kind of like, I thought, well, how efficient as a organism can I be? How tiny? Not tiny. I mean, Josh, you've known me, and I weigh 30 pounds more now than when I was a runner, and I work really hard to keep on that mass. But if I don't work hard at it, I lose it. So
yeah, you're one of the most active people I know, to be honest.
So when I last year I went through some trying times for a month or two, which included having COVID, and the COVID was nothing. But I lost my appetite for a week. Dude, I lost 5 pounds from just not eating in the week. So I was, between the stress and the other stuff, it was kind of weird. I get it, and again, I get it all back, and it's all, it's all muscle, and that's a testament to the malleability of the body. And so I'm sure a lot of that was just, water weight or whatever. But where am I going with this? The point is just that, this power to weight ratio is something that's so, I think, important in terms of pure performance. Cyclists, the better climbers are just relatively smaller guys. Guys who have won the Tour have been generally smaller cyclists than the average guy in the Tour.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I mean, when I played high school football, I was center at 195 pounds, going up against guys over 330. But I actually trained in the gym, and squatted and deadlifted and did lunges, and those guys obviously weren't doing that. So when it came time to get in the trenches, I was beating them off the line every time and then putting them on their ass.
Yeah, or just sidestepping a little bit because of your speed or whatever. Yeah.
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say I had any speed.
No, but I mean quickness. Quick
feet.
Quick feet. Somebody who's that big has a lot of there's a lot that has to go on to adjust to your deft movement. Right?
I used to just get
I just
under
lull
them
people to
faster. That's
sleep.
it. Get under them faster.
Yeah.
I remember I was playing DN, so I was just 225 playing DN, going up with guys like that, 280, 290, 300, 330. It was,
And you're a Miami boy, so you're going up some real
I was
talent.
going up some big guys. Yeah, it's crazy.
You know what I like about this book so much, though, Mark, is not only that. I mean, there's no bullshit in there, right? You lay it all out on the line. You tell people exactly, really how it is, which I appreciate more than anybody, because that's what I try to do with people. But you also give people resources on how to supplement that diet and make it better, right? You talk about cold exposure, things like cold exposure, right? That really help elevate your ability to recover and to be able to perform. And, you don't see that a lot in books about nutrition.
Well, I mean, a lot of what happens, and I've noticed this in my 15 years of writing Mark's Daily Apple and the tens of thousands of testimonials I've gotten, is that people have different experiences with changing the way they eat, and some people respond immediately and get amazing results, and others, hit a plateau, and they get some results, but not what they thought they'd get or what they wanted. And in many cases, we have to kind of go a little bit deeper. And as I said in the beginning of the show, a lot of this is based on diet, but some of it is also based on the amount of sleep you get and the amount of how you control stress, because stress hormones in many people cause the body to retain fat and not let go of fat. So stress management, the recovery from exercise, what you mentioned, cold exposure. I mean, I try to do, like today I'm going to go home and do a cold plunge. I do what I call fire and ice. I do sauna for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I do.
You crank it up like Laird Hamilton does, like 240.
I can't. I'm in a building at our place where the max is 194. And that's still pretty warm. I mean, 194 is pretty warm. I was on Rogan a couple weeks ago, and he's like, his is at 160. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute.
Jesus Christ.
That's
I mean, he's
like
got
160 in Miami right now.
He's an animal, that guy.
Yeah, but he does 20 minutes or 25 minutes. And but then from there, I go into a cold plunge, which is at 47, 48 degrees. And I try to do 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes, something like that. But that's as much for my mental game as it is for my recovery game. If I were going to do it just for recovery, I probably would only do the cold plunge, and I'd probably only do it. In other words, I'd do it without the sauna first, and I'd probably do 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes, and that'd be it. I would just, go back up to my apartment and stay cold for half an hour. No, that's what happens. That's how it works. It works when you get out of the water and you're shivering, not forever. Like I've done it where I've tried to go 4 or 5 minutes and then not warmed up afterwards, and I'm shivering the whole night. And that's wrong. So that's like,
I mean, that's a big thing with Wim Hof, right? And his method is doing all of those motions before and after you get out of the ice.
And my co-author on the book, Brad Kearns, he's a big fan of this, and for a while he was doing like 4 to 5 minutes in an ice bath, and then he would go for a run. Ooh. And I'm like, I'd be too stiff after that to go for a run immediately. But that's how he warmed up, and it was a great sort of,
Wow.
He does not do that anymore. He's sort of like, it was some of these things that we do are like personal challenges to us, and we tend to go too far sometimes.
Experiments.
Yeah.
I mean, when you
experiments
work
important,
in health and when you work in the health and wellness space, it's kind of inevitable, right?
No, for sure. And so for me, the cold exposure is like, all right, what's the literally what's the most I can take and not die? Okay, so I figured out what that was, and then I don't need to do that every day.
What is that?
I don't need to do that every day.
That box, yeah.
Don't need to do that every day.
What's the time frame on that?
Well, it depends. It's so they're relative to the
Temperature.
To the temperature, and there's a big difference. Like I've done 7.5 minutes at 51 degrees, and then I've only done 5 minutes at 48 degrees, and 4.5. I mean, as the temperature comes down by degree, it's a legitimate sliding scale where the amount of time you can spend without getting, I haven't risked death, but the idea that you'll be very uncomfortable for a long period of time if you keep doing this, and maybe subject yourself to, you'll lower your immune system instead of boosting it, which is sort of crazy and stupid and antithetical to what you're trying to do in the first place.
Yeah.
So, Mark, when it comes to your whole lifestyle approach and everything you're doing and all these different elements, when it comes to somebody a regular individual who's, let's say, never even been in the gym or done some kind of, activities in their life consistently, let alone even, touch healthy, nutritionist food, what is your easiest way to approaching that for somebody like that? How do you ease them into that so that way they actually get the results they're looking for correctly?
Yeah. Well, the food is the key, and I think the idea of hunger, appetite, and cravings, which runs a lot of people's lives, is a big deal. That's the hurdle that most people run up against in other diets. And what we try to do with the Primal Blueprint, with the Keto Reset, with 2 meals a day, with all these ways of eating that I've come up with, which they all revolve around teaching your body to be good at burning fat. And once you become good at burning fat, once you become good at using ketones, then you start to recognize that you don't need to eat as much food as you thought you did. And your hunger isn't really driving your life. And when you can get a hold of hunger and appetite and cravings, it's probably the most empowering thing people can do. So of all the benefits you hear about, well, I lost 50 pounds or I lost 110 pounds. I hear that all the time. I got off my meds. I had more energy. My sex life is great. I'm more productive at work. All these amazing benefits. But I realize now I can do this for the rest of my life. I realize now that I have control over my appetite. I realize now that the way I was eating before was only causing my body to produce the kind of hormones that prompted my hunger and never got me off that roller coaster and never got me untethered from that leash of one meal to the next. So the ability to understand that you're actually not hungry, it's just noon, and you're not really hungry, you're just habituated to putting something in your mouth at 12 o'clock.
Becomes a routine.
It becomes, and so to untether yourself from that and go and just kind of have a realization that, wow, I feel great. I'm energetic. I'm not hungry. I don't need to eat. Let me see how long I can go today without eating. And I don't ask that anyone make themselves be hungry. I mean, I don't want this to be uncomfortable. The whole point to 2 meals a day, the book, was to make this process enjoyable, doable, sustainable, so that you could do that. So for people who are starting from zero and haven't been athletes and are very overweight, I'd say to the extent that you can remove the crappy food, so you get rid of the industrial seed oils, you get rid of the sugars, the refined carbohydrates, and all that stuff. You eat real food. Don't even pay attention to the amounts that you eat yet, but just pay attention to your appetite. When is the next bite not that appealing to me? When am I just literally having a contest with myself to see if I can finish everything on the plate versus picking the fork up and going, hey, you know what? I'm not even hungry anymore, and I can push that aside. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of exercise, walking is still the best thing anybody can do. So if you're somebody who's getting started on this path and you've had, issues getting to the gym or doing any sort of activity at all, walking is the number one human activity. And the more you can walk, the better it is for you. So if it's little bouts of 5 minutes 6 times a day, that's just as good as one bout of 30 minutes. If you can take a call, which anybody can now, on your cell phone while you're walking, that's great. Do that. Find ways to move around throughout the day.
Love that.
And then, sleep. We haven't talked much about sleep, but sleep is like the most overlooked critical component of most people's health. So what that means is don't go to bed having just watched TV. In other words, stop watching TV maybe an hour before you go to sleep. Maybe read a book or, do something in the low light. But
read 2 meals a day.
Read 2 meals a day, yeah. Or read 1 meal twice a day. And then regular sleep hours. So, it's if you can get a regular sleep schedule and create a sleep environment where the room is literally 67, 68 degrees, there's blackout curtains or some way that you've made your sleeping environment completely dark. If not quiet, then a gray noise. And there's a lot of apps that you can put on your phone for gray noise so you're not just interrupted during your sleep. And make sleep, as critical a component of this process as your new way of eating or your new diet would be. So those are the three things: get the sleep dialed in, get the get your pantry cleaned out and your refrigerator cleaned out, so you're not tempted by crappy foods, and then walk.
Love that.
Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely love that.
And perfect timing. We're at an hour. I think that's a phenomenal way to wrap things up. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for coming in. Obviously.
Yes. No, my pleasure. Great to see you, Josh.
Yeah. Always good to see you. I love hanging out with you, man. It's always great.
Yeah, no, Josh told me a lot about you, and seeing what you've done already, even on my own. When he told me, he was like, "Man," I was like, "This is gonna be amazing." And just sitting through all this, learning all this information, but most importantly, going home and applying it. It's the most important thing, and I really appreciate you sharing this with us and the audience.
My pleasure.
Yeah. How can people reach out to you, and how can people find the book?
Well, the book is 2 Meals a Day. It's on Amazon, and that's, I guess, the only place you can buy books these days. I don't know, but it's on any place that sells books. Mark's Daily Apple is my blog, and I've been putting something up every day for the last 15 years. I think that's pretty much it. Primalkitchen.com is the food company, and you can check any one of our 85 products now.
Yeah, you guys just came out with frozen meals, right?
We've been the meals have been out for almost a year. We just got the COVID sort of put the kibosh on our launch because they have to be frozen. They have to be in a frozen section of a store, and no one was going to the stores. But yeah, the frozen meals are great too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So just like we like to end it here on the podcast, we love to do our quick little burner question rounds. So we're gonna hit you with some of those. All right, question number 1: what is your favorite meal?
Lamb chops, broccoli, and red wine.
You get that at Milos? Is that what you're talking about?
I did last night.
Yeah, it's so good. It's my favorite thing
I
at
did
Milos.
last night. Yeah.
Question number 2: what is the one activity you love doing the most?
Well, there's that, and then I love stand-up paddling. Yeah.
That's right. He's told me about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we still got to go out one day for sure.
Question number 3: he actually showed me a picture. I was like, "Damn!" I was like, "I gotta look like that."
Well, that's why I like it. It's the best full body workout there is.
Love that.
Yeah.
Question number 3: what's the craziest and wildest experience you've ever had in your career?
Oh, in my career, I mean, it's just I'm 67, soon to be 68 years old. I've had a lot of weird stuff happen. So I mean, I'm just going to say, a year into the food business, we hit an impasse that was so big that we thought we were going to be out of business immediately. We had a manufacturing glitch that we couldn't figure out, and we tried 3 or 4 different times over a period of 4 months to fix, and we couldn't fix it. And we just were, my partner and I were like, "Oh my God, that's the end of it." It was a great run while it lasted, and some little shift in literally a chiller pipe in making mayonnaise was the fix, and
Wow.
the rest was history.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Just such a little minute thing.
Yeah.
Insane.
That spicy mayo is my favorite though. Day old steak, and just put that in there in the morning.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
Last and final question: what's the biggest piece of advice you can leave off to all our listeners today in one sentence?
The biggest piece of advice would be to trust your gut and persevere and never give up, because at some point what you are doing has meaning and will turn into something, even though it doesn't seem like it right now.
Love that.
Ooh.
Way to end it.
Great. Thank you again, Mark, for coming on. Make sure you guys go check out his new book, 2 Meals a Day. Check out all the other books, Keto Reset, Primal Blueprint. Go to the store, pick up those frozen meals, get some avocado mayonnaise, some other Primal Kitchen products. They're amazing. If you guys love this episode and love what we're doing here with the Sweat It Out podcast, make sure you guys leave us a rating and review, and make sure you're subscribed, because that's how you're going to get all the updates.
Boom.
Peace.
Much love.
Cool.